As the ceasefire in Gaza holds, ending the 2-year brutal war, the occupation army still holds key territory while launching new operations beyond the truce line. Meanwhile, the United States has submitted a draft UN resolution proposing an international enforcement force and transitional governance structure in Gaza under its umbrella. The international force would operate in the Gaza Strip for at least 2 years and whose task would be to demilitarize the Strip, along with establishing the training a new Palestinian police force. Why does the United States insist on deploying an enforcement force rather than peacekeeping mission? And will this path of security architecture deliver genuine peace? Welcome to In Depth. According to the Jerusalem Post, the United States has submitted a draft resolution to the United Security Council proposing the creation of an international stabilization force in Gaza intended to operate for 2 years to demilitarize the Strip and train a new Palestinian police force. The resolution also calls for establishing a non-political Palestinian technocrat committee to manage civil services until local institutions stabilize, effectively replacing Hamas as Gaza's governing authority. The Jerusalem Post notes that Israel was not informed in advance of the draft, and its National Security Council confirmed the issue has not yet been discussed by the Israeli Security Cabinet. Israeli officials expressed concern that the proposal was moving forward without consultation, calling it a make-or-break event. The United States mission, led by Ambassador Michael Waltz, has invited Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the United Arab Emirates to support the resolution and show regional backing at the United Nations. According to Axios, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz met with Palestinian diplomats in New York to discuss Washington's draft UN Security Council resolution establishing an international stabilization force in Gaza. The proposed force would operate for at least 2 years to secure Gaza during a transition in which Israel gradually withdraws and the Palestinian Authority implements reforms before taking over governance. The meeting marked a rare USPA engagement on Gaza's post-war future. While the United States and Israel oppose immediate PA involvement, Arab and European nations, including France and the United Kingdom, have pushed for a stronger Palestinian role in the resolution's text. Sources told Axios that the Palestinian delegation supported by the proposal in principle, but sought clarifications and greater participation in the transitional phase. Despite Israel's objections, negotiations continue, with the United States aiming to finalize the resolution and bring it to a Security Council vote within 2 weeks.
With the war-torn Gaza Strip still facing the heavy presence of the occupation army, a new plan is emerging. Washington has circulated a draft United Nations Security Council resolution which would authorize a 2-year mandate for an international stabilization force in Gaza, an enforcement force, not a traditional peacekeeper. According to the text, the U.S. plan would give the force enforcement powers and charge it with protecting civilians, reopening border crossings, and assisting humanitarian deliveries. Reportedly, the United States hopes to present the final text for a vote within 2 weeks, though negotiations continue over command structure, troop composition, and the degree of Israeli involvement. The text also calls for a traditional civilian body named the Board of Peace to oversee governance in the enclave, while a new Palestinian security force is trained. At the same time, Egypt, as a leading mediator, has announced it will host a major international conference in November to mobilize funds for Gaza's reconstruction. This American initiative raises questions about the occupation army's ongoing operations and control over borders, the powers that the enforcement forces would have, and the prospects of a Palestinian state. At stake is whether Gaza will return to a Palestinian Authority or remain under de facto Israeli military control.
And for more analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, and from Jenin by Nauman Tawfiq Al-Abd, writer and political analyst. A very warm welcome to both our guests, and thank you very much for your time. We start off with Mr. Osman. Mr. Osman, a draft resolution was presented to the United Nations Security Council by the United States. It authorizes an international stabilization force in Gaza under a proposed 2-year mandate. Given how did you read that, and what kind of power these forces will be granted?
Thank you for having me, Rana. Nice to be back with you once again.
Always my pleasure, sir.
Thank you. It seems that the United States is very eager to maintain the ceasefire in Gaza. And so far, we have been the ceasefire has been around for almost a month now. It's been in effect. It is surviving and enduring despite the continuous Israeli violations that have taken the lives of over 200 Palestinians over the past 4 or 5 weeks. Yet the ceasefire stands. However, we are stuck in the first stage, and we have not been able yet to move forward to the second stage. And this is why the United States is trying to push forward the stabilization process of the ceasefire by starting phase 2, which basically deals with the deployment of international forces, the disarmament of Hamas, the post-war governance of Gaza, and the withdrawal of the Israeli army supposedly, so on and so forth. However, the problem is that there are profound disagreements with regards to several of details of the second stage that were supposed to be
Dr. Mohammed Osman, do you expect, in light of the ongoing, of course, of the ongoing bombings and, of course, everything that's taking place, do you expect that this ceasefire would move on to a second stage that you're discussing?
I think it might. However, there seems to be more challenges now other than the Israeli violations, and that is, even though certain details of the second phase were supposed to be discussed more deeply between the Arab mediators and the United States, especially with regards to post-war governance, the functions of the international force, and the schedule of the Israeli withdrawal, the U.S. is moving forward with a UN resolution, something that Egypt and many other actors, including the Palestinian factions, have called for. But the problem is that it stipulates the deployment of an international force, yet, however, it does not call it a peacekeeping force. It's a peace enforcement force. And of course, these are two very legally different terms, because that means that they will have two very different mandates. A peacekeeping force, we know what that is, a neutral force that oversees the application of a ceasefire and keeps the peace. A peace enforcement force is something else. A peace enforcement force, President Trump said, and the draft resolution said, that it will be responsible for the disarmament of what remains of Hamas. So this is basically turning this force into a new force that will wage war on Hamas, basically, instead of Israel. And this, of course, will be a recipe for disaster, and it means that we will be entering an entire new phase of the conflict in Gaza. And it's very, very concerning that the UN resolution, the draft resolution, as far as we have read, does not include any provisions that compel Israel to provide a timetable for the withdrawal from Gaza. And also, there is no stern, strong commitment to transferring the Authority in Gaza back to the Palestinian Authority after a certain time frame. It says that the Palestinian Authority has to be reformed first, because this could happen. Until then, Gaza will be subjected to the governance of the so-called Peace Council, headed by President Trump, basically placing the Gaza Strip under an American trusteeship or an international trusteeship. And this is something that the Arab countries, including Egypt and the Palestinian factions, have reservations on. It was proposed by the Arab mediators and by the Palestinians that this international committee or board could be an advisory body that would oversee the ceasefire and reconstruction. However, the idea that it will take over as the active governing force of Gaza and the political leadership of Gaza, basically, this is very concerning, Rana, and it could cause many disagreements down the line that could be to the
Got your
detriment
point, Dr.
of the
Mohammed
ceasefire.
Osman. I'll leave it there and I'll be back again. Mr. Nouman El Abeid, the U.S. draft UN resolution envisions a 2-year international stabilization force and a transitional governing body, namely the Board of Peace. From a Palestinian perspective, sir, how does this proposal affect Palestinian sovereignty and the principle of self-determination in Gaza?
Of course, thank you for having me here. And now, yeah, we as Palestinians for a while now, we have been asking for the Security Council interventions and to implement all the international laws when it comes to the Palestinian cause, and then stopping the aggressions on the Palestinians was a main request that we called for, and that the Arab and Islamic countries have called for to stop this genocide that has been going on for 2 years. And as Trump's peace declaration came up till now, the Israeli occupation forces aren't implementing the ceasefire and aren't honoring the deal. And this shows that maybe the Israeli government will also not honor the upcoming phases that are the more important ones that have to do with Israel's withdrawal and having international forces, and also the Palestinian police and the transitional government. And yesterday the US has talked about a draft resolution. They want this resolution to be issued by the Security Council, but actually they took the validity of the Security Council when they said that the all the upcoming phases have to be under the mandate of the new state and the BOP. And we want to have a mandate that is Palestinian or related to the UNSC. And then they are saying that they will take mandate for 2 years, and it may even go beyond that, according to them agreeing, and that the national sovereignty will agree and to have the all the points agreed upon by the Israeli occupation forces. And we know that Israel refuses any shape or form of a Palestinian authority, and so when this draft resolution gave the right to Israel to have an opinion and to have and to for their opinion to be binding, did they actually implement the reformation program or not? But we know beforehand that Israel will not say that the national forces will be able to mandate Palestine or be a part of the peace process. And we are also asking to have the forces have some kind of resolution to divide us from the occupation government, and not just have these forces instead of the Israeli occupation forces. So yeah, this draft resolution is actually doing what the Israeli occupation government is doing. And so yes, this transitional government that they are proposing will not be it will not have to do with Israel, but actually it somehow connects to it. And so yes, the uh, Palestinian unity here, we need to be a part of this, and we
Of course,
fear
sir, you
it
need
will.
to be part of this. Mr. Osman. Mr.
Can
Osman, your take on Mr. Tawfiq's comment and answer to my question.
To be quite honest, Rana, I did not quite hear the entire
Okay.
statement, Mr. Tawfiq,
Sir,
due to some technical difficulties, and I can barely even hear you. So can you please repeat the question?
they do have technical problems there, and it was a problem yesterday as well, sir. Mr. Osman, the draft resolution calls fit enforcement force, not peacekeeping force, and we were discussing this in our first part of the interview. What is the difference, and why do you think the US chose to call it enforcement forces in the resolution?
So I will try to explain this in more depth at this point to answer your question, Rana. So a peacekeeping force is a force that is authorized by the UN Security Council usually, or totally. It has to be recognized by or authorized by the UN in order for it to be a legal peacekeeping force. And it is deployed in a country with the consent or in a conflict zone with the consent of all the conflicting or the warring parties, and they are a neutral force that should oversees the state of a ceasefire or a cessation of hostilities in a certain region, and reports the violations to the UN Security Council, and they can only use force to defend themselves. This is what a peacekeeping force is in a nutshell. A peace enforcement force is something that is completely different. Of course, for it to be legal, it has to be authorized by the UN Security Council as well. However, it can be deployed not necessarily with the consent of all the
And which
parties.
do you prefer, Dr. Osman?
Of course, a peacekeeping force, a peace enforcement force means that we're sending a force to wage another war in Gaza. Because, for example, when the UN authorized a US-led military intervention against Iraq when it invaded Kuwait, that was a peace enforcement force. So it was a force to wage war on Iraq, which was basically violating international law back then. So the UN Security Council authorized the international community to form a peace enforcement force and take military action. So if we are speaking about a similar scenario in Gaza, where we will create a coalition of forces that will go into Gaza to disarm Hamas basically by force, if need be, this will be a disaster, Rana. This means that these forces will continue the war against Hamas on Israel's behest, or so it would look like at least. So if this is what the United States is trying to do, basically recreate the conflict in different terms where Israel and the United States do not have to bear the responsibility or the direct responsibility, I don't think that's the right way to go. There is a very, very, very constructive dialogue going on between the Palestinian factions and between the mediators and between the Palestinian factions as well about ways by which disarmament could be achieved within a certain reasonable time frame, maybe in a few months, a few years, the kind of disarmament, whether it will be a partial disarmament or a total disarmament. But the idea that we will completely ignore and dismiss these efforts that are undertaken by the mediators, including Egypt, and try to push for the idea of a peace enforcement force, which we accept in principle, an international stabilization force. However, its mandate should be clear. Its mandate should not be joining the war against one of the warring factions, basically, because this defeats the purpose of peace in Gaza and the ceasefire, Rana. I hope I made it clear that I made the
Yes, sir,
distinction
got
clear.
your point. Thank you very much. And we move on to Mr. Nauman. Israel's National Security Council said it wasn't briefed on the United States resolution beforehand. How might this lack of consultation affect trust between the two allies, and could it signal a broader shift in how the United States is handling diplomacy on Gaza?
Uh, First of all, we actually don't believe what the USA says or what Israel says because we know very well that everything that the US proposes actually aligns with what Israel wants, and then it also fulfills their goals in some way or another. They manipulate things. And so, yeah, the Israeli occupation forces, what they couldn't achieve on a military level, they can achieve some another way, like what happened with the draft resolution from the Security Council now. And so, yes, Israel will fulfill its goals. And so, yeah, we know there is continued coordination, and yeah, this draft resolution is in the favor of Israel. And so, yeah, we don't need coordination between the USA and Netanyahu's government. We know they are coordinating. And now we go back to the US statement when they talked about the international forces. He said that if the Palestinian factions don't disarm, we will be the ones to do this. And yeah, here honestly, we don't want the Arab or Islamic forces to be in this situation with Palestine. These countries are very supportive and put so much effort to reach this agreement, and they were mediators to reach the Sharm el Sheikh agreement. And I don't think that the Arab and Islamic countries will accept what the US has proposed, the draft resolution that they have proposed about the stabilization force. And so, yes, we need to go back to the negotiation table. And by the way, in the Security Council, we have some non-permanent par- parties like Algeria, Pakistan. And so, yes, these countries also needed to have a say in what is going to happen and to explain what we are calling for when it comes to the draft resolution, when it comes to the Board of Peace and the International Stabilization Force. And so,
Mr. Osman, the United States reportedly submitted its draft resolution to the UN Security Council without informing Israel in advance. What does this suggest about Washington's current level of coordination with Tel Aviv on Gaza's post-war arrangements, sir?
But Trump is trying to enforce this agreement according to an American vision. Basically, President Trump is doing what President Trump does best when he is undertaking his foreign policy, and that is engaging complete unilateral actions all the time. And even though there might have not been enough consultations with the Israelis, or so the media reports claim, at least, it does not seem that this resolution does not take into account Israel's interests and Israel's vision. For one thing, what we have seen, from at least from what I've read from the excerpts of this draft resolution, it is very favorable towards Israel. It takes into account Israel's security interests. It puts Israel's security interests first, the idea of disarmament, the idea of peace enforcement, and even it speaks that reconstruction of Gaza should begin in 2027, more than a year from now, after the security situation is stabilized. And this is something, of course, that that will serve only to deepen the humanitarian crisis.
If the United States and Israel decide on a security force, not on a stabilization force.
Yeah, they can name it whatever they want.
And this is another issue.
Yeah. The thing is, they can call it an international stabilization force, a peace enforcement force, a bologna sandwich force. At the end of the day, the Security Council determines its mandate and competencies. So if the Security Council says it is a peace enforcement force that is responsible for the disarmament of Hamas, then, as I said, it will be just another belligerent in the conflict in Gaza. And this will not help, and it will not help anyone. And it was very interesting yesterday Egypt, the Egyptian foreign minister yesterday said that Egypt supports the international stabilization force, but Egypt will not, will not necessarily contribute troops to this force. This is what the Egyptian foreign minister has just said. And this might be an indication that Egypt and other countries are not completely content with the way things are going right now. And many of the countries that are willing to participate, I don't think will be on board with the idea of deploying troops in Gaza to basically fight Hamas. This will not help maintain peace or spread peace in the Gaza Strip. This is just starting a completely different war with a very different context. And at the end of the day, this is exactly what Israel wants. However, the Security Council at the end of the day is not owned by the United States. It has 15 members, including 5 permanent members, which also include Russia and China. So rest assured, Rana, if this resolution does not secure the consensus of the major powers, it might very well fail in the Security Council. This is unlikely at the moment because China and Russia support the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement and support the peace, the Trump peace plan so far. However, if this peace plan goes off track and decides to get us into completely other discussions about starting a new conflict with Hamas using other states, I think then maybe there will be a huge readjustments of stances for many of the regional and international actors.
Mr. Norman, reportedly, the United States hopes to bring the resolution to a Security Council vote within 2 weeks. Do you view this as a genuine step toward ending occupation and durable peace?
No, of course. The USA, if they really want peace and stability and security in the region, they wouldn't have proposed such draft resolutions that have to do with the Gaza Strip. Peace isn't, the Palestinian cause isn't just about things that are going on in the Gaza Strip. Yeah, of course we need to stop the genocide and stop the bloodshed, save our people. We know that some Palestinians are still besieged and in the West Bank and East Jerusalem that have daily attacks and settlements, and so all of this was not recognized by the U.S. This is not an economic or a humanitarian cause. We want freedom and liberty. It is a political cause, actually, and so the initiative and the that he said as sustainable peace and prosperity, this does not provide peace nor prosperity, because prosperity gives the peoples the right to self-determination, especially the Palestinian people, and we see what the Israeli occupation forces are doing in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, or with what's happening in Lebanon and Syria even, and other projects that are still on this government's agenda. And so yes, Israel wants to keep their occupation and to broaden their settlements. They want to displace our civilians, and so yes, the U.S. government can actually to say daily that he was the one to end the wars, but when it comes to reality, and especially in the Palestinian cause, the U.S. president is far from peace.
Very true, sir, and I got your point. Mr. Osman, the U.S. draft resolution also envisions a transitional civilian administration in Gaza known as the Board of Peace, which will oversee Gaza's civil service through a technocrat committee. From your perspective, sir, and narrative, what are the main governance risks of importing such a transitional mandate into Gaza while the occupation army remains in the territory?
Rana, it's ridiculous. Trying to put Gaza under an international trusteeship is just ridiculous and unacceptable. This was a very controversial provision of the Trump plan. President Trump himself said that it might be revisited. It will be up for discussion. However, it doesn't seem that he's discussing anything with anyone because he's trying to legalize it with a UN Security Council resolution so that it will be a fait accompli. Yeah, reality on the ground that everyone has to accept since it is supported by a UN Security Council resolution, which of course has binding power legally according to the UN Charter. However, placing Gaza under international administration basically isolates it effectively from the state of Palestine. Gaza is a part of the state of Palestine, which constitutes the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, and it is recognized by the United Nations, over 159 countries, and it is also an observer state in the United Nations and a member of various international organizations. So this is a reality that President Trump cannot deny, and therefore Gaza cannot just be cut away from the the body of the Palestinian state as the Americans want it to be. Of course, they do concede that there will be a civilian technocratic government or local administration that will run Gaza and take over power from Hamas. And this is something that Hamas has agreed to. And of course, the Palestinians have also agreed that this technocratic committee, its reference point will be the Palestinian Authority. However, the
God,
problem
Dr.
is
Osman, I got your point, and I'm very, very sorry because we're out of time, and you understand. On behalf of all the team here, in depth theme, of course, that was Dr. Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, and Dr. Nauman Tawfiq, writer and political analyst. We thank you so much for your informative and intellectual knowledge and insights and valuable analysis. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned. On behalf of all Qnews team and In Depth team, thank you very much. I'm Rana Al-Khassas. Thank you for watching.